The fundamentals of content editing. Everything you need to know in 2024. Hi, welcome to First Editing. I'm Joellen, and today we'll be talking about the fundamentals of content editing. First of all, it is important to recognize that there is a difference between content editing and all the other forms of editing out there, such as copy editing and line editing and proofreading and so much more, which look for more surface level mistakes. They look for spelling, syntax errors, grammar mistakes, punctuation problems. Content editing, on the other hand, it looks at the organization of the work, the flow, the readability, and the overall story itself, which is why it's also sometimes referred to as developmental, organizational, substantive, or comprehensive editing. So, as you can probably tell, this is a very in-depth edit, which means that a content editor will look at things like the plot, the setting, character elements, themes, ideas, and everything and anything that is connected to the fiction story itself. Now, when dealing with nonfiction, they'll dig into your ability to motivate, inspire, and educate your audience with an authoritative and engaging presentation. Let's talk about when content editing takes place and how it's actually done. So because this is more of a big picture edit, it's recommended that it's done quite early on in the writing process because with fiction, you might have to rewrite big scenes, fix plot holes, and change your character development in your novel. So in nonfiction, you may need to elaborate and support your idea or your subject matter. You might want to insert engaging stories to support your proposal or review your overall purpose for each section. So this intense content editing process is also why copy editing should always come later because you don't want to spend all these hours perfecting your language just to have to erase the whole scene and lose all that work. So this is basically how the writing process works as well. You should usually work from big to small so that when you're writing your first draft, you don't really have to worry about commas or spelling because your key storylines and themes are so much more important. Once you hand over your manuscript to a professional editor, they'll usually look at some key elements. And some content editors also correct spelling and grammar, but it's not always like that. So check with your specific editor before you start. So what would a typical priority list for content editors look like? First, in fiction, they'd review your structure and your sequence of your plot, scenes, and paragraphs. They want to make sure there's a logical and cohesive sequencing there. And with nonfiction manuscript, this is your overall presentation of your ideas, your subject matter, and the support material that you provide. It's all called the flow. So your content editor would then review your text for clarity, and they'd be looking at whether your sentences are active, clear, and direct, and if there's any way to improve the readability overall. They'll focus on engaging your reader and maintaining their interest. After all, you are writing for your audience, right? And good content editor is strengthening your presentation and focusing on this overall appeal to your audience. So there's syntax checks also, which include grammar and spelling. But as we've mentioned before, it's important to ask your content editor if they include syntax in their editing package. Many do not. So also discuss what you want and need specifically with your editor. Ask the editor what they will provide so that there's no surprises. Other details of the editing process can include continuity of the artistic voice for fiction authors or nonfiction, making sure that the story aligns with the voice or brand of the writer or the company that they represent. And remember, there is further polishing after your revisions during a copy or line edit. And there are also editorial services such as checking your formatting, final adjustments such as proofreading after formatting. And finally, with a content edit, there's feedback, which happens when the content editor sends the manuscript back to you. They will write with comments and suggestions throughout the story. And the feedback can sometimes be delivered in a separately outlined document. So either way, you will make your revisions based upon these comments, suggestions, and feedback provided by your content editor. Let's move on to some tips for working with a content editor. First, try to polish your manuscript by self-editing as much as possible. When you run it through as many checks as you can, you're giving your editor more time and space to focus on the structure and the presentation of the manuscript itself instead of the spelling, commas, and things like that. You're using your editing investment wisely so that you get your best return on your editor's writing and coaching skills. Our second tip is going to be to acknowledge that content editing is a much more time-consuming process than a line edit, copy edit, or proofread. So for a fiction document, your editor must review every scene and story element, and they ensure it creates and supports a very strong story arc. While a nonfiction document can be complex and contain multiple different elements like call to actions, quotes, tables, graphs, images, detailed feedback, and all that. So this is why your content editor might need more time to allow the story to marinate within the editing process. And they'll be reviewing your overall ideas and your presentations to determine how it can strengthen and engage your readers in the overall plot. So lastly, don't expect that your manuscript will come back ready for publication after the content edit. You will need to make revisions and structural decisions based upon the feedback that you receive from your content editor. They do not rewrite the text. They provide suggestions and comments that'll help you make the necessary corrections, and they outline what needs to be fixed, elaborated, truncated, or even rewritten. So before we part for today, there's one question left. Why should you hire a professional content editor in the first place? Well, the truth is that all written content needs editing, preferably by someone other than the writer or their family members. This is because writers are often too close to the work, so they struggle to view it objectively. Friends and family members, they can give you some valid opinions, of course, but they're still not trained professionals in the publishing industry. So content editors, on the other hand, are specifically trained to review ideas, concepts, sentences, plot ideas, character arts, organizational elements, which means they can give you high quality and expert advice on how to best rewrite, strengthen, and correct your manuscript. At First Editing, for example, we look for the little details that writers and even peer groups often miss. While peer groups or beta readers might understand what they like or don't like in the stories, professional editors have expert knowledge of the publishing industry. We focus on scene-setting elements, character development, and story arcs for fiction. With nonfiction, we evaluate the presentation, the structure, your support materials, and the audience engagement. So this makes it possible for us to make corrections in line with the writing industry standards. And that's what we're here for. So that's us for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And if you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.